The wind howled through the barren landscape of the planet Drathar. Jack Thompson, a young human diplomat, stood at the edge of the landing platform, staring at the desolate view ahead. His mission had seemed simple: establish peaceful relations with the alien inhabitants and offer aid to their colony. However, what he didn't expect was how deeply the experience would affect him. Jack had been to many planets before, meeting various species from across the galaxy, but none had intrigued him like the people of Drathar. They were an ancient race, known for their advanced technology and quiet ways. They rarely interacted with other species, and their motives were often a mystery to outsiders. He had been on Drathar for a few weeks, attending meetings and observing their culture from a distance. The colony was peaceful, yet something about it felt ... off. There was an undercurrent of tension in the air, feeling that the calm was only temporary. As Jack walked toward the city, couldn't help but notice the small groups of aliens who avoided making eye contact with him. It wasn't fear, more like an unspoken rule to keep their distance from humans. Jack had learned to accept this, as his mission was about diplomacy, not friendship. Yet there was one alien whose eyes seemed to follow him everywhere he went. Her name was Serafina. She was the daughter of the planet's leader, a princess in every sense of the word. Jack had first seen her at a gathering in the colony's main hall. She was beautiful, yes, but there was something else about her, something that made her stand apart from the others. She had an aura of mystery, of quiet strength. When their eyes met across the room, Jack felt a strange connection, as though he had known her in another life. He had told himself it was just his imagination. After all, he was here to do a job, not to get tangled up in emotions, but fate had other plans. That evening, after another long meeting, Jack found himself walking alone through the colony's garden. The peaceful sounds of the wind and the distant calls of alien wildlife filled the air. He didn't expect to see anyone out here. Serafina stood in the middle of a path lined with glowing flowers, her back to him. She was alone, something Jack rarely saw. The princess was always surrounded by guards or attendants, her every move watched by the eyes of the colony. Here she was, standing in the quiet, staring at the stars above. "Princess Serafina," Jack called out, his voice breaking the silence. She turned slowly, as if she had been waiting for him. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment neither of them spoke. It felt like time had frozen, the world around them disappearing. "I didn't expect to see you here," Jack said, taking a few steps forward. He didn't know why he was so drawn to her. Something about the way she carried herself made him want to understand her more. Serafina smiled faintly, her lips curving in a way that seemed to hold many secrets. "Not many people come here," she said softly, her voice a melodic sound that seemed to match the beauty of the night. Jack nodded, feeling a bit awkward. "I don't blame them. It's a beautiful place, though a little lonely."
Seraphine's gaze
softened, as if she understood exactly what he meant. "Loneliness is something we all feel," she said, her eyes lingering on Jack for a moment longer than necessary. "But it is also something that brings people together." Jack didn't fully understand her words, but he felt an unspoken connection. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "I'm glad to see you out here. I was starting to think you didn't like humans." Serafina laughed softly, a sound that was both gentle and knowing. "It's not that I dislike you, Jack. It's just ... we have different ways of seeing the world." Jack raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "How so?" She took a deep breath, her expression growing serious. "On this planet, we've always kept to ourselves. We have our own ways, our own rules. The rest of the galaxy is ... complicated. You humans are new to us. You bring change whether you realize it or not." Jack nodded slowly. He had heard similar things from others on the planet, but Seraphine's words felt more personal. "I understand. But isn't change necessary? We can't stay the same forever." Seraphine's eyes sparkled with a hint of amusement. "Perhaps. But sometimes, the changes we bring are more dangerous than we realize." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Did she mean by that? Before he could ask, she stepped closer to him, her gaze intense and searching. "You're different from the others," she said, her voice low. I can see it in your eyes. You're not just here to make deals and shake hands. You're here because you feel something deeper. Jack wasn't sure how to respond to that. It was true, though. There was something about this place, about her, that had stirred something inside him. He couldn't explain it, but it was there. Maybe, he said, his voice quieter now. Maybe I just want to understand. Serafina studied him for a long moment, then took a step back. Maybe we all want to understand. Not everyone is ready. For the truth, Jack frowned. What truth? She smiled, but it was a sad, knowing smile. The truth of what is coming. The truth of what you'll find out here, in the stars. Before Jack could respond, she turned and began to walk away, disappearing. Into the night, as quietly as she had appeared. He stood there, frozen in place, watching her go. There was so much she hadn't said, so much left unsaid between them. But one thing was clear, his life was no longer just about diplomacy. Serafina had opened a door in his heart, and he didn't know where it would lead. He wanted to know. More, he wanted to understand. But for now, all he could do was wait, hoping their paths would cross again, as he looked at the stars above. Jack whispered to the night, Will I see you again, Serafina? Jack's days on Drathar felt endless after that night. The silence between him and Serafina stretched longer with every passing hour. Despite his best efforts to remain focused on his mission, his thoughts kept returning to her. He replayed their conversation over and over in his mind, trying to understand the strange emotions she had stirred in him. The letter she had given him remained in his pocket, still unopened. He could feel it there, like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Every time he thought about reading it, a part of him hesitated. What if it was just a formality? What if it was just another message about peace and diplomacy? But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it, something he was missing. One quiet evening, after a long day of meetings with the colony's leaders, Jack found himself standing in the same garden where he had first seen Serafina. The stars above glimmered softly in the vast, empty sky, and the air was cooler than usual. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the letter, his fingers trembling slightly as he unfolded the piece of paper. It wasn't long, just a few short lines, but the words felt heavy. The handwriting was elegant, sharp, and neat, much like Serafina herself. He read the letter out loud to himself. To the one who seeks the truth, the future we face is not what it seems. The darkness that comes is more than just a threat to our worlds. It is a threat to us, to all that we hold dear. I cannot say more, but trust that our meeting was not by chance. You are part of something much greater than yourself. The path ahead will not be easy, but if you seek me, you will understand. If you do not, then the truth will remain hidden from you. Be brave, for the truth lies beyond the stars. Jack stood still, reading the last line over and over. It didn't make sense. What was she trying to tell him? Was she in danger? What did she mean by the truth and the path ahead? His heart pounded as his mind raced. He was sure of one thing. Serafina had not just been a diplomat. She had been trying to tell him something far more important. Something that went beyond their brief encounter. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise, a soft rustling behind him. Jack quickly turned, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at his side. But it wasn't an enemy. It was one of the colony's guards, an older alien named Korath. His eyes narrowed as he approached Jack, a look of concern on his face. Human. Diplomat, Korath said, his voice low. You are disturbed. I sense it. Jack sighed and tucked the letter back into his coat. I'm fine, he replied, his voice a little too sharp. Didn't want to explain. Not to Korath, not to anyone. The truth of the letter wasn't something he wanted to share just yet, until he understood it better. Korath raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. Instead, he looked toward the horizon where the sun had just set, leaving a deep purple sky in its wake. The Princess Serafina, Korath began slowly. She carries a heavy burden. Not many know the true weight of it, not even her closest allies. Jack felt a cold chill run through him. Was Korath implying that Serafina was in danger? That there was more to her than just the Princess of Drathar? What do you mean? Jack asked, his voice tight with curiosity. Korath didn't answer immediately. He studied Jack for a moment, as if weighing his words. Serafina is not like the others. She is not just a leader. She is the key to something bigger. But she is trapped, just as you are. All of us are, in one way or another. Jack was about to speak to ask what Korath meant, but before he could, the alien turned and walked away. His words hung in the air, unanswered and unexplained. Jack stood there for a long time, his mind swirling with the possibilities. What was Korath trying to tell him? How did it relate to the letter? The next day, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Everywhere he went, he caught glimpses of people looking at him from behind closed doors or hidden corners. It was as if the entire colony knew something he didn't. The tension in the air was palpable. Jack couldn't ignore the growing sense that something was about to happen. Something big. He spent the rest of the day in meetings. But his mind wasn't on the diplomatic negotiations. It was on Serafina, on the letter, and on the cryptic words Korath had shared with him. He needed answers, and he needed them soon. Later that evening, Jack returned to his quarters, his mind still racing. He couldn't focus on anything but the letter. He knew he had to take action. If he didn't, he might never understand what was truly going on here. And he was afraid of what might happen if he didn't act soon. Without wasting another moment, Jack gathered his things and left his quarters. He knew where he needed to go. Serafina had spoken of a truth beyond the stars. Jack wasn't sure what it meant yet, but he was determined to find out. He walked toward the colony's central hub, where Serafina had told him she would be waiting. But when he arrived, the place was empty. There were no guards, no attendants, and no sign of the princess. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Just as Jack was about to turn back, a small device buzzed in his pocket. It was a message. He pulled it out and read it quickly. The words on the screen were short, but they sent a shock through him. They know you're coming. You must hurry. Trust no one. The message ended there, but the meaning was clear. Jack's heart raced, as he realized the danger was far greater than he had imagined. Serafina had been warning him all along, but now time was running out. He knew one thing for certain. This was no longer just a diplomatic mission. It had become something much bigger, and he was about to uncover a truth that would change everything. The air felt different the next day. The usual calm of Drathor seemed to have shifted, as if something invisible was hovering over the entire colony. Jack's every step felt heavier, as if the weight of his decision to act was catching up with him. He had to find Serafina and get to the bottom of the mystery she had left behind. The message he had received late last night lingered in his mind. Its warning, sharp and clear. They know you're coming. You must hurry. Trust no one. The cryptic words were chilling. Jack wasn't sure who they were, but he could feel the danger closing in as he prepared for the journey ahead. Jack couldn't help but wonder about the path Serafina had set him on. Why had she chosen him? Was he just another pawn in a larger game? Or was there something more between them, something deeper than either of them understood? He had no answers, but he knew one thing for sure. He had to keep moving. Forward. The stakes were too high now to turn back. Time was running out. After securing a small ship and gathering his supplies, Jack set out for the outskirts of the colony. He wasn't sure where to start looking for Serafina, but he had a feeling she was nearby. The device in his pocket buzzed. Again, this time with a map and a set of coordinates. They led him to an old, abandoned structure on the far side of the planet. It was a place he had never seen before, and it didn't appear on any of the colony's maps. He had a sinking feeling that this was where the answers lay. As Jack approached the coordinates, the landscape grew more rugged. The path became narrow, winding through dense trees and steep hills. The colony's bustling energy faded behind him, replaced by the quiet hum of the wind and the occasional rustle of the underbrush. The further he went, the more isolated he felt. It was as though he was leaving the safety of the known world behind and stepping to something unknown, something dangerous. The structure came into view just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. It was a large, dark building built into the side of a mountain. The walls were covered in vines and the windows were dark and shattered. It looked like it had been abandoned for centuries, its purpose long forgotten. But Jack could feel it. This was the place. He approached the entrance cautiously, his hand on the hilt of his weapon, ready for whatever might lie ahead. As he stepped inside, the air grew cold. The dim light from his flashlight revealed old, broken furniture and dust-covered floors. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint echo of his footsteps. He moved deeper into the building, each room he entered more desolate than the last. But something wasn't right. It felt too quiet, too still. Feeling that he was being watched. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every creak of the old walls felt like it was following him. At the end of a long hallway, Jack found a door that was slightly ajar. The faint sound of voices drifted from within. His heart raced. Was it Serafina? Or was this the trap that he had been warned about? He pushed the door open slowly, careful not to make a sound. The room was large, filled with rows of old equipment and strange machinery. In the center, illuminated by a flickering light, stood Serafina. She was surrounded by a group of people, her back to Jack. Her face was tense, her eyes fixed on something in the distance. Serafina? Jack's voice was barely a whisper, but it was enough to get her attention. She turned quickly, her eyes wide in surprise. For a moment, they just stared at each other, neither knowing what to say. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had found her. But what was she doing here? And why had she led him to this place? Before she could speak, a voice from the shadows cut through the silence. You shouldn't have come. Jack spun around, his hand reaching for his weapon. A group of figures emerged from the shadows, their faces hidden by hoods and masks. They were tall and imposing, dressed in dark armor that covered their entire bodies. One of the figures stepped forward, his voice cold and stern. We warned you to stay away, human. This is no place for you. Jack's hand tightened around the hilt of his weapon, but he didn't draw it. He wasn't here for a fight, not yet. He needed answers. Who are you? He demanded, his voice steady but firm. The masked figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached up and removed his hood, revealing a face that was unfamiliar to Jack, but one that exuded power and authority. We are the ones who have been watching, the man said. We are the ones who have been controlling the future of this world. Jack's stomach tightened. You're the one she warned me about, the man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Serafina knew the truth, and she brought you here for a reason. You are the key to the next phase of the plan. Voice interrupted the conversation. Shouldn't be here, Jack. It's not safe. They're the ones behind it all. Shh. She gestured to the group of figures around her. They've been controlling everything. The war, the peace talks, even my father's decisions. They're the reason the galaxy is in turmoil. Jack stared at her, shocked. But why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me about all of this? I had no choice, Serafina replied, her voice low and strained. Had to play along to protect you, to protect both of us. But now, now they know. They know we've been working together, and they won't let us stop what's coming. The masked man's eyes darkened. You have no idea what you're getting into, human. Future's already set. You're either with us or you're against us. Jack took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had come here for answers, but what he had found was more questions, more danger. The weight of the situation was beginning to sink in. Serafina had been right all along, and now they were both caught in a web they couldn't escape. But Jack wasn't about to give up, not now. He had to find a way to stop this, to change the future, before it was too late. Tell me what's going to happen, he said, his voice steady. I want to know everything. The man's smile faded, replaced by a look of contempt. You'll find out soon enough. The tension in the dark room was suffocating. Jack stood facing the masked figures, his mind racing with every new word they spoke. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Serafina had known all along. She'd been part of this plan, or at least caught in the middle of it. But Jack didn't have time to process everything now. His heart was pounding in his chest, and he could feel his pulse quicken. The stakes were too high, and he had to act. The masked man stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You've been played, human. You think you've come here to rescue the princess, but you're only walking straight into our trap." Jack's hand instinctively tightened around the grip of his weapon. His training kicked in, but he didn't reach for it. He wasn't here to fight, not yet. "I didn't come here for a fight," Jack said, his voice steady but firm. "I came for answers. I came to understand what's going on." Serafina moved slowly, stepping between Jack and the masked man, her face a mask of worry and determination. "This was never supposed to happen like this," she said, her voice strained. "I thought we could find a way out, but it's too late. They've been controlling everything. They knew you would come for me, and now we're trapped." Jack looked at her, his eyes searching for the truth in her words. "Why didn't you tell me? Why keep me in the dark?" "I couldn't risk it," she replied softly. "I had to play along. I had to protect you, Jack. But now they found out that we've been working together, and they'll do anything to stop us." The masked man laughed, a low, cold sound. "You don't understand, do you? It's not just about the two of you, it's about control. The galaxy is on the edge of chaos, and we are the ones who will shape its future. You're nothing more than a pawn in this game." Jack's eyes narrowed. "I'm not your pawn. And I'm not going to let you control everything." Serafina glanced at him, her expression filled with both fear and relief. "You don't know what. You're up against these people," she trailed off, her voice shaking. "They've been pulling the strings for years. They've manipulated governments, orchestrated wars, and kept the galaxy on the brink of collapse, all to secure their own power." The masked man stepped forward, his gaze turning cold. "Now you think you can stop us? You're just one man, one human. You have no idea what you're dealing with?" Jack's gaze hardened. "I don't need to know everything to know that I'm not going to let you destroy everything. You may have control, but not for long." Serafina reached out, her hand brushing against his arm. "Jack, please, you don't understand. The truth is worse than you can imagine." For a moment, Jack hesitated. His mind was filled with questions, but his heart was set on one thing. He couldn't leave her here. He couldn't walk away and pretend everything was fine. He had to fight, not just for her, but for everything they stood for. "We don't have time for this," Jack said, turning his attention back to the masked man. "What do you want from us?" The man's eyes glinted with cold amusement. "We want nothing more than for you to join us. Together we can shape the future. You're the key, Jack. You're the one who can bring the galaxy to its knees, or help us rebuild it in our image." Jack shook his head. "I'll never be a part of this. I'll fight you if I have to." Seraphine's voice was barely a whisper. "You don't know what you're asking, Jack. We've tried to fight back before. They always win." Jack looked at her, his resolve hardening. "Not this time. Not if we stand together." Before anyone could respond, the room was suddenly filled. With the sound of footsteps, Jack spun around, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of an attack. The masked figures around them shifted, as if preparing for a confrontation. Jack's fingers hovered near his weapon, ready to draw, but he knew it wasn't the right time. Not yet. Serafina grabbed his arm, her grip firm. "We need to leave." "Now," Jack nodded, his mind racing. This wasn't the end, not yet. They still had a chance, but they had to move quickly. The masked man's eyes followed them, but he didn't make a move to stop them. It seemed like he had other plans, something bigger than this moment. Without a word, Jack and Serafina turned and fled down the hallway, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. They ran through the abandoned building, the darkness closing in around them. Jack could feel his heart racing, but he didn't slow down. Couldn't afford to. Not now. As they rounded a corner, Jack heard a faint crackling sound from the walls. The building was old, and it had its secrets. He had to get out. They both had to get out. "Just a little further," Jack said, his voice tight. Serafina was breathing hard beside him, her face pale, but she nodded, trusting him. They reached the back door, but just as Jack pushed it open, they were met by another group of masked figures. They stood blocking their path, their weapons raised and ready. Jack's heart sank. There was no way out. They were trapped. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Jack's mind raced, searching for a way out. But Serafina was the one who moved. First, with a sharp cry, she grabbed a nearby piece of debris and hurled it toward the masked figures. The explosion of noise and chaos gave them just enough time to slip through the opening. Running into the dense woods outside, Jack's lungs burned as they sprinted, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The voices from behind them grew fainter, but Jack didn't trust that they were free yet, not until they were far enough away from the building. Serafina slowed, her breath coming in quick gasps. "We're not safe. They'll find us." "We'll find a way," Jack said, his voice determined. "We have to." Serafina looked at him, her eyes filled with fear and something else, something deeper. "I don't want to lose you, Jack." "You won't," he promised, pulling her close. "We'll make it through this. Together." And with that, they ran into the night, knowing that the road ahead would be filled with dangers they couldn't yet see. But one thing was certain. Jack wasn't going to let Serafina face it alone. The night air was thick with tension as Jack and Serafina sprinted through the dense forest, the sound of their footsteps barely audible above the rustling of leaves. They had made it out of the building, but the escape was far from over. Jack's mind raced with thoughts of what would happen next. He had never been in a situation like this before. There were too many unknowns, too many dangers. "We have to keep moving," Jack said, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "They'll be looking for us." Serafina nodded, but there was a weariness in her eyes. She had always been the strong one, the leader who carried the weight of her people's hopes on her shoulders. But now Jack could see the cracks in her composure, the fear she was trying so hard to hide. "I know," she replied softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "But where do we go? We can't keep running forever." Jack paused for a moment, trying to think. They couldn't afford to keep running without a plan. They needed help, and fast. But who could they trust? The masked figures had already made it clear that they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Jack didn't know how much longer he and Serafina could stay ahead of them. "We need to find allies," Jack said finally, his voice steady. "People who aren't part of this game they're playing." Serafina looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "Oh, and who do you suggest we trust?" "The galaxy is full of enemies, Jack. You saw what they did. They've been controlling everything for years." "I know," Jack replied, his voice low. "But there has to be someone who can help us. Someone who isn't part of their plan." For a long moment there was silence between them, the forest around them was eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. The weight of the situation pressed down on them both, but neither of them spoke. They both knew that time was running out. "We need to go to the rebels," Serafina said suddenly, her voice sharp with determination. "They're the only ones who can help us. They've been fighting the same battle for years, and they've been hiding right under their noses. If anyone can help us, it's them." Jack looked at her, surprised by the sudden shift in her tone. This wasn't the same princess who had been so unsure of herself only hours before. This was someone different, someone who had found their resolve. "The rebels?" Jack asked. "Are you sure about this? We're not exactly in a position to ask for help from anyone." Serafina gave him a hard look, her eyes flashing with the fire he had seen in her before. "If we don't, we'll be dead before we even get the chance to figure out what's really going on. We have no choice, Jack. We have to go to them." Jack hesitated for a moment. He didn't know much about the rebel faction Serafina was talking about. They were a shadow organization, operating in the fringes of the galaxy, fighting against the same forces that were trying to control the universe. They had a reputation for being both dangerous and elusive, but right now, they seemed like their only hope. "All right," Jack said finally, "but we do this my way. We can't afford to make any more mistakes." Serafina nodded, a small smile playing. At the corner of her lips, agreed. The new sense of purpose, they set off toward the rebel base. The journey was long and treacherous, but Jack was more determined than ever to find a way to stop the group that had been pulling the strings behind the chaos in the galaxy. He had never felt more certain of anything in his life.
This was the
only way forward. As they moved deeper into the forest, they encountered no one. No soldiers, no trackers, nothing. It was as if the entire world had gone silent watching them from the shadows. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, but he couldn't pinpoint where the danger was coming from. Every rustle of leaves, every bird call, made his senses sharpen. Finally, after hours of walking, they reached the hidden entrance to the rebel base. It was a small, seemingly insignificant door carved into the side of a mountain, surrounded by dense foliage. Serafina stepped forward, pulling a small device from her pocket. She held it up to a hidden sensor embedded in the stone. The door creaked open, revealing a dark hallway beyond. Jack hesitated for a moment, looking at Serafina. "Are you sure about this? We're about to walk right into the heart of their operation." Serafina met his gaze with a quiet determination. "This is the only way we can stop them. You've seen how powerful they are. They're pulling the strings, Jack. But the rebels, they've been fighting them for years. If anyone can help us, it's them." Jack nodded, though doubt still lingered in his mind. There was so much at stake, and so many unknowns. But he had come this far. He couldn't stop now. Together, they stepped into the darkness. Inside, the base was far more advanced than Jack had expected. Walls were lined with equipment that looked like it had been scavenged from all corners of the galaxy. But everything was carefully maintained. The space was alive with movement people, working, talking, and strategizing. It was clear that the rebels were a well-organized group, and their efforts were not just about survival, they were about fighting back. Serafina led Jack through the base, her steps, confident now, as though she had been here before. Jack followed, closely, his eyes scanning the room, taking in every detail. The rebels were a mix of species, some human, some alien, all working together for a common cause. Jack felt a sense of relief. For the first time since his arrival on Drothar, he felt like they had a real chance at defeating the people who were controlling the galaxy. They finally reached a large, open area where a group of commanders sat around a table, deep in conversation. As they approached, one of the commanders looked up, her eyes narrowing as she saw Serafina. "Princess Serafina," the commander said, her voice sharp with suspicion. "What are you doing here?" "We thought you had turned your back on us." Serafina didn't flinch. "I've never turned my back on anyone," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here because we have a common enemy, and it's time we join forces." The commander studied her for a moment before turning to Jack. "And who is this?" "This is Jack," Serafina said, her tone firm. "He's with me." The commander's gaze softened slightly. "All right, then. You'd better have a good explanation for all this." Serafina nodded. "We do. And we need your help." The rebel base was bustling with activity. Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency in the air, as though every moment counted. They had come here seeking help, but the answers they needed were still just out of reach. The rebellion was their only chance, but there were no guarantees. Serafina was right. If they didn't act now, they might never get another chance. Jack stood with Serafina in a dimly lit room, the sounds of voices and footsteps echoing from the corridors outside. He could hear the tension in the voices of the rebels as they discussed strategies and plans for the future. He understood the urgency, but something in the back of his mind kept gnawing at him. How could they trust these people? How could they trust anyone? Serafina turned to him, her face serious. "You're quiet. What's on your mind?" Jack met her gaze, his mind racing. "I'm just thinking. We're on the edge of something huge, Serafina. And I don't know if I'm ready for this." Seraphine's expression softened, and she placed a hand on his arm. "I know it's hard. I know the weight of this is heavy. But we have no choice. We have to do this for the future of the galaxy." Jack nodded slowly, but his heart still felt heavy. He had come a long way from the peaceful diplomat he had been when he first set foot on Drothar. He had never imagined that his life would take such a dramatic turn. The stakes were higher than ever, and the uncertainty of it all made his resolve falter. "I didn't sign up for this," Jack said, his voice low. "I didn't ask for any of this." Seraphine's eyes were filled with understanding. "Neither did I," she said quietly. "But sometimes we don't have a choice. Sometimes the galaxy needs us to step up, even when we're afraid." Jack looked at her, her words striking a chord deep inside him. He had never thought of himself as a hero. He was just a man trying to do the right thing. But this was different. They were up against something far bigger than either of them. They were standing on the edge of a war that could change everything. The commander of the rebel base, Lyra, entered the room, her face set with determination. She was a tall woman, her features sharp and strong. Her eyes studied Jack and Serafina for a moment before she spoke. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady but firm. "The time to act is now. If we don't make a move, it could be too late." Jack met her gaze, his mind still spinning. "What's the plan?" Lyra crossed her arms over her chest, her expression hardening. "We know where their stronghold is. We've been tracking their movements for months. It's a heavily guarded facility, but we believe it's where they're controlling everything, the governments, the military forces, everything. We believe they've been using a technology to manipulate the galaxy's leaders." Serafina stepped forward, her voice steady. "If we destroy the facility, we can take away their control. We can stop them from continuing their operations. But we need to be quick. Every day we wait, their influence grows." Jack felt a wave of realization hit him. This was it. This was their chance to end the war before it could truly begin. The risks were enormous. If they failed, they could all be wiped out. "What's the plan to get inside?" Jack asked, his voice firm despite the anxiety he felt. Lyra glanced at Serafina before speaking. "We'll infiltrate their base under the cover of darkness. We have a small team, highly skilled, experienced fighters. We'll go in quietly, destroy their main control systems, and leave before they even know we were there." Serafina turned to Jack, her eyes searching his face. "This is it. This is our chance to stop them. But we need you, Jack. We need you to help us." Jack's heart raced. He had been through so much already, but this was different. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to change the galaxy. The decision bore down on him, but he knew what he had to do. "All right," Jack said, his voice steady. "I'm with you. Let's do this." Seraphine's eyes softened, a flicker of relief passing through them. "Thank you," she whispered the next. Few hours were spent preparing for the mission. Jack couldn't help but feel the tension in the air as the rebels moved with military precision. Everyone was focused, everyone knew their role. Stakes were high, and no one was willing to back down. Jack knew the risks, but he also knew that they had to succeed. The galaxy's future depended on it. As the night fell, the team made their way toward the enemy base. The darkened landscape seemed to stretch endlessly before them, the silence broken only by the crunch of footsteps on the rocky ground. Jack walked beside Serafina, his thoughts focused on the mission ahead. "You're sure about this?" Jack asked quietly, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "There's no turning back once we go in." Serafina nodded, her face set with determination. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." They reached the base just as the stars began to shine in the sky. The facility was massive, built into the side of a mountain. It looked like a fortress, with guards posted at every entrance and security systems running along every wall. But the rebels had a plan. They knew the weaknesses in the system, and they were ready to exploit them. The infiltration was swift. The team moved silently, slipping past guards and security checkpoints, their movements fluid and coordinated. Jack could feel the tension building with each step. They were getting closer to the heart of the enemy's operations, and he knew that any mistake could cost them everything. They reached the main control room, where the final step of their mission awaited. Serafina placed her hand on the console, her fingers trembling slightly. "This is it," she said softly. Jack stood beside her, watching as she began to input the sequence to destroy the facility's control systems. The countdown began. "Minutes," Lyra said, her voice sharp. "We need to move." Jack nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The mission was almost over, but would they make it out in time?